And hope everybody's having a good Memorial Day weekend. It is late May here in 2020. Just wanted a chance to round up some friends. Kit McConnico, Arch Bell, a couple of guys that I've been very fortunate to come across, some Texas natives throughout my career, and two guys who happen to be, when it comes to soccer in the Austin area, about as good as it gets with their interaction both in the community and their just general knowledge to tap into. Kit, we'll start with you. You're an Austin native, grew up here. What was your first memory of you getting excited about soccer?
I've been around soccer as long as I can remember. I started playing when I was very young. I love the game. I wasn't very good. I've never been very good, to be perfectly honest, but I love the game. I remember going to the UT soccer camp out at Intramural Fields when I was, 4 or 5 years old, one of the younger campers there. I love that. And I was fortunate that I knew Nigel Bowman, who's a legend in the Austin soccer scene, very early on. I knew he and his wife, Maggie, then his girlfriend, actually used to babysit my brother and I. We went to their wedding, but Nigel played for the Austin Thunder back in the day. My father would take me to watch him, and I wanted to be Nigel. My father wouldn't let me talk the way Nigel did on the soccer pitch, which was something I learned very early on. Not just the soccer skills from him, but I learned some choice words. But no, soccer has always been a part of my life. It's growing up. It was my favorite sport. Living in Argentina in my 20s, it's always been a huge part. And to see the growth of it in the city, you go from the Thunder back in the day, the Sacadillos, up to the Aztecs, the 1.0, the 2.0 version, the Bold, and now top tier soccer coming in 2021 with Austin FC. It's been a long road, but it's been a fantastic one, and I, like everyone else, am really excited for next year.
Our lives have all crossed paths, the three of us, at various points, soccer being the common theme along the way. Before we jump in with you, Arch, I want to stay with Kit. We've got 3 real facts about Kit and one quasi-lie about Kit, and we'll have Kit elaborate here. Kit, the 4 facts overall I have for you. You're a River fan because of your freshman roommate. River played down in Argentina. That'll be a story that both you and Arch have in common in a way. Another fact I have for you is after a River game you attended back 2004, your mom, your brother, you all got to meet the president, a couple of players. You toured the trophy room. You walked around that sacred field. Third fact I have, which could be the most important fact, is you grew up in the house next door to me, believe it or not, but yet we never knew each other. And then the fourth fact, you started playing as a forward in your young career, but you were either too good or not good enough. You wound up as a goalkeeper. Let me walk you through those 4. You're a River fan because you're a freshman roommate. Tell us more. Is that right?
It's true. My freshman roommate at St. Edwards, Jorge Jimenez, is now a tennis pro at Austin Country Club. Went to St. Edwards on a tennis scholarship. He's from Venezuela, but his parents are Chilean, and because of that, he was a huge, and Arch will know this guy very well, El Matador Marcelo Salas. He was a huge Salas fan, and El Matador Salas was one of the great River strikers for a long time, and because of that, he was a big River fan, and he would tell me all about River and El Matador Salas and all this stuff, and he was the reason that I got interested in River. When I went to Argentina for the first time, that's one of the first places I went, to El Monumental.
So that brings me to that second note. Did you really get the VIP treatment when you were there at the stadium?
Absolutely. Met the president, Jose Maria Aguilar, toured the trophy room, met Coco Ameli, Turco Hussein, got to walk on the field the first game I ever went to, and the president then, Jose Maria Aguilar, said, "Welcome to the family. You're part of River now," and I have been ever since.
Third note, we didn't know each other as kids, but I have here you lived in the house next door to me growing up. Is that right?
You and I lived a block apart growing up.
Right.
But as the crow flies, we lived probably 75 feet apart and didn't know each other.
So we'll say technically that was the lie, but you literally grew up on the block right behind my house. And it took a few years for us to cross paths. Our families, though, happen to know each other. Finally, that means we do have another true fact here on you. You started off as a forward. You finished off between the pipes.
I was a terrible soccer player, as I said. I was tall. They put me up as a target forward. They realized very quickly that the use of my height would be better in goal. They gave me a pair of gloves and said, now keep the ball out because you're not having any luck putting it in.
So Kit's journey to Austin, that's simple. He like me, born here in Austin. Then we've got the pride of Midland, Texas. I have to imagine big Sockers fan and Arch Bell. Arch, tell us about growing up in Midland and embracing, obviously, the number one sport in Midland, Texas.
Yeah, right. The home of Friday Night Lights. Well, that's Odessa, but the Midland, Odessa, Permian Basin region. But every young kid growing up was playing soccer before you could start playing Pee Wee football. So I was one of the many who at age 3 started playing soccer, and like Kit, I really liked it. And I remember, in the 80s when I was growing up, playing. It wasn't on TV a lot, but when it was, I was always watching it. And one of my first memories is watching the 1986 World Cup that was being played down in Mexico. And really, I always followed the sport as I got older, and once it became, it took a long time for soccer to become a mainstay on television in the United States, where you could actually watch a game from Europe. But once that became a regular thing, it was a huge relief. But I've always enjoyed the sport. I've always enjoyed played as a kid, and still try to play today.
I have to imagine when you're just trying to keep up, growing up with the game, you're probably not getting much from the Midland local press, but maybe leaning on the folks over in Dallas.
Yeah. So what happened was my parents took the Dallas Morning News, and the Dallas Morning News would always be delivered in the morning. The Midland Reporter-Telegram was an evening paper back then, or an afternoon paper. So the Dallas Morning News would show up, and after you flip through all the Cowboy stuff and the Texas Ranger stuff and all that, at the back page, they had what they call the scorecard, where they would just list, scores from all these different, minor league, baseball, so on and so forth. But they would always list the standings and the scores from the Premier League, from the Bundesliga, from Serie A, and from La Liga. And I remember just looking at, you would look at the names of the teams in the Premier League standings, and it was, Queens Park Rangers or Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, those were so bizarre, so foreign to me, but at the same time intriguing. So I was familiar with these team names once I was able to kind of really start being able to follow the game on a more regular basis.
So just like we did with Kit, I've got 4 little nuggets about you, 3 of them true. One of them may be a little less true. The first nugget I have, again, with maybe your big influence in soccer being a little biased by Dallas being down the road, you thought perhaps the best player in the world was playing over there in Big D. I'll ask you that in just a moment. Second fact I have here, your first ever professional game you saw in person was involving Atletico Madrid. And third fact I have on you, you played goalkeeper for your school team, and you saved 3 penalties in a shootout. Little did I know that I was going to be joined by 2 heroic goalkeepers on this. How about if we ever come up with a name, we just call it Gloves Off here on our podcast. My other podcast name was stolen when I Googled it. I learned that the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders had already taken it. And then the final fact I have here is you tried to walk on in college at Furman. And the story ends with a happy ending. You came away with a trophy when it was all said and done. So let me quickly walk through these with you. How about the greatest player in the world playing right there in Dallas while you were growing up as a kid?
Yeah, so obviously at that time what was it? This was like the early to mid 80s. The NASL had fizzled out. So really the only soccer league that was around was the indoor league. And so for me, watching the Dallas Sidekicks, the Dallas Sidekicks were my team, the indoor team in Dallas. And everybody knows that the Dallas Sidekicks, the main guy was Tattoo. So whenever Tattoo would score a goal, he'd always throw his jersey into the stands. And so Tattoo scored a lot of goals at the old Reunion Arena there in Dallas where they played. And so watching Tattoo and the Sidekicks, that was my guy. I thought he was the best player in the world.
With that said, the first professional game you ever saw involving Atletico Madrid?
Yeah, so this is when I was studying abroad in Spain, in Madrid, and I got a chance to finally I got to a game, and I saw Atletico Madrid play against Betis, which is a team from Sevilla in Spain, and a huge thrill, right, to be able to go to a big time European match and really get a chance to absorb that atmosphere, and so that was pretty cool. That was October 1996 when I got a chance to do that.
That's a tough act to follow. How about your playing days? I mentioned here this third fact. You played goalkeeper for your school team, and you were the hero, at least on one occasion.
Yeah. In a shootout, let's see here. This was like my 6th grade year for Trinity School in Midland, playing against Highlander. Penalty shootout, saved 3 PKs, and that was pretty much the zenith.
Well, if all 3 of those are true, that leads me to believe this last one here. You did not walk on at Furman, but I think there's kind of a truth to it. You did ultimately grab a title while you were on campus.
This is correct, and this needs to be remembered. Yes, I wasn't even close to ever, making the team at Furman, which has produced the likes of Clint Dempsey, Ricardo Clark, Walker Zimmerman, among others. And but yes, as a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity, we did win the intramurals one year, which is I'm still waiting for the oral history of that tournament win to be published, but it hasn't yet.
Yeah, that's going to be a subscription behind a paywall. So again, for folks who are tuning in, just getting you up to speed there, Kit McConnico, Arch Bell joining me. And guys, I wanted to bring you all together, because we happen to find a little time in our schedule where, believe it or not, none of us were doing anything right now. But for all the years that you all have put into coverage of soccer here in the greater region, specifically in the capital city, obviously we're seeing something special here in this final run-up. In theory, less than a year from now, we will see Major League Soccer taking place if everything continues on schedule. But, we will see no shortage of soccer coverage, but there's something special to be said about coverage that exists even before a city becomes, quote, a Major League Soccer town. Obviously, it's been an international soccer city for a long time, and we'll have a chance to dive into that. But let me just start off. First time you two crossed paths, Arch, I assume it was with Football in Vivo, the popular hour-long show that you and Kid and some others in the community did for community radio over there at Co-op, KOOP, on the FM dial. And, of course, half that show in Spanish and the other half hour in English.
Yeah, Kit and I, I met Kit because he was kind of like you back in the day. Like he lived on my street. He was in the neighborhood, and our neighbors across the street. Yeah, our neighbors across the street. Kit used to babysit them, right? Kit, the Mazzarana boys, Lori and Paul Mazzarana's kids, and so I got a chance to meet Kit. And when the first time I ever met Kit, he was wearing a River Plate jacket, and I looked and I was like, "That's River Plate, isn't it?" And he gave me this look like, "How do you know that?" Because who's walking around Austin, Texas, and this was like maybe 2009, 2010, with a River Plate jacket. So at that point, I was already a co-host on Football in Vivo. And to explain Football in Vivo, that show started in 2009. And what's interesting, neither Kit nor I were on the show at the time. It was actually started by David Alvarez, who was on the show for pretty much from the beginning to the end. And then another guy, Jose de Leora, who started Tacoba, which is a very known restaurant in East Austin. So Jose and David were the brand that was their brainchild. They were the ones who actually started Football in Vivo. Jose couldn't continue because he was too busy trying to open Tacoba. So David was looking for somebody, and we had some mutual friends. They suggested me that he reach out to me. And so starting in 2009, I basically started doing Football in Vivo with David. And then after a while, David, because of work obligations, he wasn't able to come to the show every week. So I kind of had to take over hosting duties. And needed some people to help. So Kit was able to come and help a lot, which was great, and basically became a co-host over the years. And since then, we had a lot of guests, a lot of different people who would just informally become co-hosts and would show up. And yeah, that's how it was until, what was it, Kit? What was it, 20? I don't even remember when we stopped football in Vivo. Was it 2016, something like that, when we, when it finally came to an end? But yeah, what was so unique about football in Vivo was the first half hour we would speak in Spanish, and the second half hour in English. So you really, if you were going to have somebody on the show, you really needed who could host it or could carry the show for the full hour. They needed to be bilingual. Now, granted, a lot of times we would have like an English-speaking guest in the second half, or just a Spanish-speaking guest in the first half. But yeah, but it made the show very unique.
So Kit, there you are for the first time in your life in Austin, Texas, wearing your River Plate shirt, rooting for Argentina. Typically, folks around town assumed you were a big fisherman with that carp logo on your polo. But what was it like, this revelation, bumping into Arch, and then all of a sudden being on air at Football in Vivo?
Well, obviously, wearing the River Plate jacket didn't get a lot of comments, so I was thrilled that Arch knew who they were, and we immediately hit it off. Arch, in hindsight, probably realizes he made a terrible mistake because he invited me to come on the show once, and I just never left. I just kept showing up every week, and Arch, anyone who knows Arch, he may be the nicest person in the entire world. So Arch was too nice to tell me that he had invited me to come on once. He never made that clarification. So I just continued to show up, but it was a great show. It was fantastic. We had wonderful guests on. There were great co-hosts as well. I mean, Claudio Ostrovich, another Argentine, Jorge Iturralde from Club Deportes. And you were getting all these different points of view. You were getting points of view from Argentines, from Chileans, from Mexicans, from other people. And the fact that half the show was in Spanish and half was in English, I've gotten a lot of comments on this over the past few years since we've stopped the show, that people said, I love the show. It was fantastic. I think you were ahead of your time. But to be able to do that both in English and Spanish, and to have a different audience in large part for the first and some for the second, it gave us the opportunity to really talk about the game as a global game, which it is. We could talk about what was happening in Spain. We could talk about what was happening in Latin America. And then in the English portion, switch to what was happening in Europe and the States.
Arch, let me ask you, with Football in Vivo, how often were your topics the same from your Spanish half hour and your English half hour? And how did just the fact that you were tapping into just more than the English-speaking market in Austin allow you to really get a full feeling of what a soccer town Austin and the surrounding region are? Yeah,
I mean, the two segments were considerably different. I think, we would talk a lot of South American football in the first half hour. So we would talk about, if Jorge Iturralde was on the show, there was a lot of Mexican league talk, Mexican national team. We would talk a lot about Argentina, Copa Libertadores, Copa Sudamericana. So those topics, or just topics involving South American football, there was a lot of that. And then also things like Champions League, maybe Spain's La Liga. And then also on the local front as well, we would talk about local soccer in Spanish. And then, consequently on the English side, maybe we would drift more towards, conversation about MLS or one of the local soccer teams or what have you, maybe like Champions League, Premier League, something like that. So there would be, a noticeable shift when we would go from Spanish to English in terms of the actual content, the topics that were being covered. It was really cool that, we were able to include so many different people in the community on the show. Like, we were able to bring in Mexico fans, people from all walks, European. And, I think just so much of the credit really belongs to the people at Co-op Radio who allowed us to have that platform. Kim McCarson was the executive director there at the time, and she was thrilled to have us and just really happy. And we were the only sports show on Co-op Radio. And I don't know if they have one. I don't know if they've added a sports show since then or not. I'm not certain, but we were the only one. And we were the only bilingual radio program, I think, in the entire city of Austin. I think if you listen to Latino, whatever it is, 102.7, that's kind of like some Spanglish, but the fact I don't know if anybody else has had a dedicated like English and Spanish radio program in Austin.
Kit, we often do things with the reference of a labor of love. Often that means there's not a lot of money in it. Co-op and Football in Vivo for you and Arch and your co-host actually take it one step further. You actually had to put something into it. You had to perform community service hours just to keep the show on air. That was part of the requirement to be on community radio. What was an example of something you and Arch had to do just to stay on air?
Well, Arch was doing a lot more of that than I was, and I will admit that I certainly did not shoulder my part of the load when it came to doing the community service for our co-op hours. But we were fortunate, and Arch is right that they gave us a platform, they gave us a lot of autonomy, and they gave us autonomy when it came to community service hours. And we would go out and we do tabling for soccer games, and we'd go to places like Haymaker, we'd go to Tacoma, and we'd talk to people about co-op, and we'd go there for games. So it was kind of killing two birds with one stone. We got to go out, we got to watch soccer, we got to be with people, and we got to inform them about our show as well as co-op radio.
Arch, all of a sudden, I assume it was when you got a full-time job, an editor at ESPN FC, your plate was a little too full, also helping out with Market International, that then you had to step away from the radio show. Do I recall that correctly?
Well, I mean, actually, for a good chunk of my time at ESPN FC, I still did the show. I looking back on it, I don't know how I did that. There were times where I would be, I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but there were times where I would be like editing articles and like hosting the show. I mean, it was just, again, like it was wild, but juggling all that. But again, it was because, like you said, it was a labor of love, and I wanted it because I really enjoyed doing Football in Vivo. But I think after a while it took a toll, and it would get to the end of a quarter and I'd realize I'm like, oh, okay, we got to do like a whole bunch of volunteer hours. And when you're trying to do all this stuff, working, and then I have a family with a young daughter, and it's just like, okay, I'm gonna have to cut something out here. And unfortunately it was Football in Vivo, but when I look back on Football in Vivo, it was a great run. I think about all the guests that we had, and Kit, like, I mean, we really, there weren't too many, like nationally at that time, there weren't too many like soccer radio programs on, especially on the FM dial. And so you could call up a lot of like MLS teams and get guests. We would go out to, maybe there might be like a national team game or some friendly in Dallas or Houston, and you get some audio from that. So anytime, like if I was out, I would try to get some audio and bring it back. And I mean, we had Fernando Torres from the Spanish national team, and Eric Abidal, and like we would talk to, I remember talking to Carlo Costly, the Honduran striker.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that, Kit, where we called him to get him on air, and he said, I'm eating lunch, you can call me back, you have to call me back. And I just said, no, like you have to go on now because we've only got 15 minutes left in Spanish. So but it was, Charlie Davies came on. We were able to really, give the Austin audience a lot of great and different guests when it came to the international and local soccer scene. And of course, we had a lot of in-studio guests as well, players from the both Austin Aztecs, Phil Rollins, the old Aztecs owner, the coach, Adrian Heath. So it was, we really ran the gamut.
We'll dive more into the Aztecs and some of Austin's rich soccer history in our next segment that follows this one. But just staying on what you all have done here in the area with your coverage. First of all, Arch, there's something about the phrase, we only have 15 more minutes in Spanish. I don't know what it is about that phrase, but that's going to stick with me. Kit, I think you were already starting to juggle a couple of on-air roles. I think over at what is now the Horn. The throw-in started on Sunday. Kind of the idea of Zach Christodoulides, the local producer, engineer, and director here in town, along with an on-air guy, and Garrett Green. Garrett would later move on to Mississippi to be a minor league broadcaster. He leads the way for the AA team in Biloxi. But you three, along with Justin Simmons, would be holding things down for an hour on Sundays.
That's right, and give all credit to Zach. You mentioned Zach Crusadolitis started out as the role of our fantastic producer and became a co-host, but it was his brainchild. He had the idea. We all met. Garrett was on the air there at the Horn, and Garrett was relatively new to being a soccer fan. Zach not. His father's a Cypriot, and he grew up around soccer. So Zach had been around it his entire life, and he had this idea. He wanted to put a soccer show on. Football and Vivo had wrapped up, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do, and they brought this idea to me. I jumped at the opportunity, and the rest is history. We had the throw-in every Sunday morning, and kind of, you talk about a labor of love. It was difficult, particularly for Arch at the end, to get to Football and Vivo at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays. It was It was very difficult to get to the Horn stations for a 9 a.m. start time on Sunday mornings, particularly some Sunday mornings. But it was always fun. And this was the period where Lincoln, you and I, and you and Arch, we were doing games in San Antonio for the Scorpions of the NASL. And there were nights we'd get back past midnight on a Saturday night doing a game. And you'd wake up and you'd head in and do the throw-in. But it was a fantastic show. It gave us a new opportunity, a new platform to be on the Horn, to be on that sports talk station. And again, all credit to Zach, as well as Garrett and Justin, but it was Zach's idea. And it's something he'd been thinking about for a long time. And he said, this is what we need to do. And he knew what we needed to do, and he was ready. So all credit to him.
I was certainly
I think the throw-in was really important, Lincoln, just because, Football and Vivo had been on community radio, co-op, which again is, was great and everything. But the fact that you had the Horn, like a sports talk radio station in Austin, finally having a soccer program on the air, I really thought that was a significant advancement. That was a proof, just like, okay, there is some interest in talking about soccer on the Austin airwaves. And so for the sports talk station, the premier sports talk station in Austin, to accept that was great. And so, yeah, those guys, they really kind of, they moved things forward, I think, in Austin for that.
I always enjoyed it. Kit knows I was a loyal listener. It wasn't necessarily at 9 a.m., but I always caught the podcast, the archive, a little bit later on after my snooze button had been tortured throughout the morning. But Kit, sometimes you guys could take that show on the road and really tap into just the soccer scene here in Austin during especially international tournaments and coverage on some Sundays.
That was one of the great parts of it, the fact that we were able to do remotes. We did a live remote there at Coda and did a fundraising match afterward this was before the Bold even started. That may have been the first game played there at Bold Stadium. There were remotes for Copa America games. There were remotes for the World Cup as well. And so to be out there in that situation, it's really to be out there because that's what soccer's about. It's about community. And Austin's a soccer town. You always look at the viewership numbers, and it's been this way for the last decade. Austin has some of the best international viewing numbers for any city in the country when it comes to soccer. So to be out there and to experience that with people, to go to places like Haymaker, that was one of my favorite memories from the show.
Is Alistair McAllister still leaving you voicemails?
Alistair McAllister has been blocked on all of my devices, and I should have done that a long time ago. That being said, that quasi-Scotsman who called in one morning, that just took off. And the legs it had and his comedic chops, so credit to him. And that was, at the end of the show, that was really one of the fan favorites.
I haven't looked to confirm this, but I'll just assume he has more social media followers than myself and you combined.
Oh, I'm sure he does, of course.
Arch, today you're often with your laptop. Thank you for letting us put it to use for this call. But you're still covering the international game and here in the States, Marca, CONCACAF. What are you staying busy with right now?
Yeah, so obviously with very little soccer going on, at least some soccer's back now in Germany and Costa Rica. But there's still a need for content out there. So. Still am writing some stuff for ESPN FC, also for Diario Marca, which is a Spanish publication. They now have a page called Marca Claro USA. So it's just about getting content out to people. Also for CONCACAF.com. Been doing a lot of interviews for them, actually, because there's a need for content. And so I've had the chance to interview players like, Jair Borghetti, Carlos Hermosillo, Julie Foudy. So I've had a chance to interview like some CONCACAF legends, from the last 20 years to talk about, memories of certain tournaments or certain games. So that's actually been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed, kind of taking strolls down memory lane with different players and different coaches. So that's what I've been doing. But all of those outlets, they've afforded me the chance to do some, to cover some great events, to do some traveling. For example, last summer I was part of. I traveled with as a member of CONCACAF throughout the entire Gold Cup. Traveled with the Mexican national team. So, I mean, being able to sit on a charter flight with the Mexican national team or have a chance to interview somebody like Memo Ochoa one-on-one. I mean, those are really, really cool opportunities that don't come along every day. So I was extremely grateful to be able to do things like that.
Well, before we wrap up this segment, let me ask you, just reflect back on your time, both of you with your coverage, both here in Austin and the surrounding region, and kind of sum up over the past 10 years what you've grown to learn about the culture and the love of the game here in the capital city and the surrounding area. We'll start with you, Kit.
Austin's a soccer town. It's been a soccer town for as long as I can remember. For the last decade, the last 20 years, the last 50, Austin is a soccer town. And even before, there were the Aztecs to the Bull. They're now Austin FC. There's always been a very large contingent of fans here. They're very vocal. They're very passionate. And as the city has grown, that group of fans has grown as well. And it's fantastic to see. It's great to see all the different bars and restaurants that have their own supporters clubs, and Liverpool fans go here, the city fans, whatever the case may be. And I'm very happy that Austin has a soccer team. And a few years ago, we wondered if Austin would ever have a pro team. And all of a sudden, there's a possibility that Austin has 2 pro teams. I'm ecstatic. It's hard to believe, but it's long overdue.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kit's absolutely right, and what's so great is that it covers all backgrounds, all demographics. I mean, I can remember packing myself into Fido in 2000 for a World Cup qualifier between England and Germany. Fido, when Fido was back on 4th Street at the time, and then I can also remember watching a Mexican League final at Super Nacho, just packed to the gills. So. I mean, this is, whether it's, all the Hispanic audience, the Mexican American audience, the ones who are into European football, national team football, U.S. national team, it really runs the gamut. It's all across the board. There is a passion for the sport in this city.
Well, guys, again, when I found myself with a little bit of downtime randomly this Memorial Day weekend, I thought, let's check in with Kit and Arch if they happen to have time. I certainly have always benefited from being around you guys, certainly with respect to a broadcasting standpoint. Very fortunate to work with Arch on coverage like the high school state championships when we televised those up in Georgetown at Birkelbach. With Kit on a variety of pro soccer as well throughout Austin and San Antonio, and both you guys on some college soccer broadcasts. Look forward to when we have some headsets on. We're calling some games when it's safe to do so, hopefully in the near future. But again, I appreciate you guys. All that coverage that built up even before this was, quote, a Major League Soccer town. You guys really had your finger on the pulse and really helped satiate a lot of the hunger that local residents, both English and Spanish speakers, had wanting to talk soccer. Our next segment, when you guys rejoin me, and if you want to wear the same clothes, that's fine. Nobody's going to judge you. It looks like everybody at least showered this week, knowing that we were going to be talking here. But do look forward to our next conversation when we dive in specifically to professional men's soccer here in the state capital. Arch Bell, Kit McConnico, I'm Lincoln Rose. We thank all of you who are tuning in. Again, check back with us later this week as we'll be talking Austin soccer, such remarkable venues, all the way from House Park to next year, perhaps we'll be taking in some Major League Soccer over there at McCalla Place. All right, guys.
Nelson Field for life, baby.
Yep. We'll dive into that.